Samantha Reed was not the kind of person who liked to draw attention to herself. Despite being one of the most powerful women in the banking industry, she preferred simplicity over extravagance. On this particular morning, she woke up earlier than usual, sipping her coffee while watching the sun rise through her apartment window. Her mind wasn't focused on quarterly reports or shareholder meetings. She had something much simpler on her agenda: visiting a local branch of her own bank. It wasn't often that Samantha stepped foot into any physical branch. Most of her banking needs were handled digitally, thanks to her busy schedule and access to premium services. But today was different. There was a minor issue with her account, a transaction she didn't recognize, and though it could have been resolved online, she decided to handle it in person. For Samantha, this wasn't just about fixing an error. It was also about staying connected to the ground-level operations of her company. After all, how could she lead effectively if she didn't understand what her customers experienced? By 9:30 a.m., Samantha pulled into the parking lot of a modest suburban branch located near downtown. The building was unremarkable, with its glass, doors, and sleek logo displayed prominently above the entrance. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed softly, illuminating rows of desks where employees typed away at their computers. Customers sat in chairs lined along the walls, some scrolling through their phones, others filling out paperwork. It looked like any other day at the bank. Samantha walked in quietly, blending seamlessly with the crowd. She wore a pair of jeans, a casual blouse, and flats, nothing that screamed CEO. No one paid her much attention as she joined the queue behind a young mother juggling a toddler and a diaper bag. The atmosphere was calm but slightly tense, the kind you'd expect in a place where people came to deal with their finances. Everyone seemed absorbed in their own world, either patiently waiting or chatting idly with those around them. Behind the counter, Martin Cole, the branch manager, was already having a rough start to his day. His phone had buzzed nonstop since he arrived, each notification bringing another complaint or task demanding his attention. A customer had stormed out earlier after being told they couldn't cash a check without proper identification. Another employee called in sick, leaving him short-staffed during peak hours. And then there were the emails from corporate headquarters reminding him yet again about hitting monthly targets for new accounts and credit card sign-ups. Martin sighed heavily as he glanced at the clock. Only 2 hours had passed, but it felt like an eternity. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, trying to shake off the stress. Just when he thought things might settle down, a teller approached him with a worried expression. "Mr. Cole," she whispered urgently, "there's a problem with the system. Some accounts aren't pulling up properly." "What do you mean?" Martin asked sharply, lowering his voice so the nearby customers wouldn't overhear. "It's not just one account, it's several," the teller replied. "We've tried resetting everything, but nothing seems to work." Martin groaned inwardly. This was the last thing he needed. If word got back to corporate that his branch was struggling with technical issues, it would only add fuel to the fire. "Keep troubleshooting," he instructed, "and try not to let anyone know we're having problems. We don't need a panic." As the minutes ticked by, the line grew longer. People shifted impatiently, checking their watches or tapping their feet. That's when Samantha finally reached the front of the queue. She stepped up to the counter, offering a polite smile to the teller stationed there. "Hi," she said warmly. "I'm having trouble with my account. I noticed a charge I don't recognize and I wanted to look into it." The teller nodded and began typing on her keyboard. After a few moments, her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't seem to pull up your information right now. Our system is experiencing some technical difficulties." Samantha tilted her head slightly, her smile fading. "Oh? Are you sure? Maybe someone else could take a look." "I'll see what I can do," the teller replied, calling over a colleague. Together, they fiddled with the computer, clicking and typing frantically. But no matter what they tried, nothing worked. Frustration crept into their expressions as they turned back to Samantha. "I'm really sorry, ma'am," the second teller said apologetically. "There's nothing we can do until the system is fixed." Samantha frowned, feeling a mix of annoyance and disbelief. As the CEO, she knew better than anyone that glitches happened occasionally. but this level of dysfunction struck her as unusual, even alarming. Still, she kept her tone measured. "Could I speak with the branch manager, please? Perhaps he can help." At the mention of his title, Martin's ears perked up. He had been hovering nearby, keeping an eye on the growing tension among the customers. When the teller gestured toward him, he straightened his tie and plastered on a professional smile before stepping forward. "Good morning," he greeted cheerfully. "How may I assist you?" Samantha turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Hello. I'm having some trouble accessing my account, and apparently there's an issue with your system. I was hoping you might be able to resolve it." Martin's initial confidence wavered slightly. He had seen countless customers come through the door, each with their own set of complaints, but something about this woman felt different. There was a quiet authority in her voice, a sharpness in her gaze that made him uneasy. Still, he pressed on, assuming she was just another frustrated patron. "I apologize for the inconvenience," he said smoothly. "Unfortunately, our systems are experiencing temporary issues. It's completely out of our control." Samantha crossed her arms, her patience wearing thin. Temporary issues sounded like an excuse, one she'd heard far too many times before. She leaned closer, her voice dropping slightly. "Let me clarify something. My name is Samantha Reed. Does that ring a bell?" For a split second, Martin stared blankly at her. Then, slowly, realization dawned. His mouth fell open as he processed the implications. Samantha Reed, the CEO of the entire corporation, was standing right in front of him, dressed casually and looking utterly unimpressed. The weight of the situation hit him like a freight train. How had he missed this? How had none of his staff recognized her? "Well?" Samantha prompted, her tone sharper now. "Do you still think this is completely out of your control?" Martin stammered, his face turning red. Ms. Reed, I had no idea it was you. Please let me make this right." But Samantha cut him off with a firm wave of her hand. "Save the apologies for later. What I want to know is why a customer, any customer, would be treated this way. Do you realize how unacceptable this is?" The room fell deathly silent. Employees froze mid-task, their eyes darting between Samantha and Martin. Customers craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the commotion. For Martin, time seemed to slow down. Every word out of Samantha's mouth landed like a hammer blow, exposing not only his mistakes but the broader failures of the branch under his leadership. This was supposed to be a routine errand for her, yet here she stood, confronting him in front of everyone. And as Martin struggled to find the right words, Samantha's piercing gaze never wavered. Little did he know, this encounter would mark the beginning of a chain reaction that would ripple through the entire organization and change both their lives forever. The air in the bank hung thick with tension like a storm cloud ready to burst. Martin Cole stood frozen, his mind racing but unable to form coherent thoughts. Samantha Reed's words echoed in his ears. "Do you realize how unacceptable this is?" Her tone wasn't loud or aggressive, but it carried a weight that made every syllable feel like a direct challenge. For a man who prided himself on maintaining control, even if it was just an illusion, this moment felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath him. He swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. "Ms. Reed," he began again, his voice trembling slightly despite his best efforts to sound calm. "I assure you this isn't how we usually operate. We're dealing with some technical issues right now, and I promise we're doing everything we can to fix them." Samantha raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "Technical issues?" She repeated slowly, letting the phrase linger in the silence between them. "Let me get this straight. A customer walks into your branch, a customer who happens to be the CEO of this entire company, and instead of resolving their issue, you hide behind technical issues? Is that what you tell everyone when something goes wrong?" Her question wasn't rhetorical. It demanded an answer, but Martin couldn't find one. His brain scrambled to piece together a response that wouldn't dig him deeper into the hole he already found himself in. He glanced around nervously, hoping for some kind of lifeline from his staff, but all eyes were fixed firmly on him. The tellers, the security guard, even the customers. They were all watching, waiting to see how he would handle this impossible situation. Finally, he managed to sputter. "Of course not, Ms. Reed, it's just... Today has been particularly challenging. Our systems are down and we've been short-staffed. I didn't mean to dismiss your concerns, I simply wanted to explain the circumstances." Samantha tilted her head slightly, studying him as though she were sizing up a puzzle. "Challenging day or not," she said evenly, "the fact remains that my account still hasn't been accessed, and no one here seems capable of addressing the problem. Do you know what that says about this branch?" Martin opened his mouth to reply, then closed it again. He knew exactly what it said, that his branch was disorganized, inefficient, and ill-equipped to handle even basic customer service. And now, standing face-to-face with the CEO herself, those flaws were glaringly obvious. Worse still, he realized that Samantha wasn't just upset because of her personal inconvenience. She was upset because this incident reflected poorly on the entire company. Every misstep, every oversight, every failure at this branch tarnished the reputation she had worked so hard to build. "You must understand," Martin tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. "We're doing our best under difficult conditions. If there's anything specific you'd like us to do—" "I don't need special treatment," Samantha interrupted sharply. "That's not the point. The point is that any customer walking through these doors should receive prompt and professional service. Whether they're depositing $5 or $5 million, they deserve respect and competence. What I experienced today was neither." Her words landed like a punch to the gut. Martin flinched visibly, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her critique. He wanted to defend himself, to argue that running a branch came with challenges, beyond his control, but deep down he knew she was right. This wasn't just about today's system outage or staffing shortages. It was about a pattern of neglect, a lack of accountability that had festered over time. And now, thanks to this chance encounter, it had all come crashing down on his head. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched taut, broken only by the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to feel sympathy for Martin or admiration for Samantha's boldness. Even the employees seemed torn, glancing nervously between the two figures locked in this uneasy standoff. Then, without warning, Samantha took a step back. She crossed her arms loosely over her chest, her posture relaxed but commanding. "Tell me, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice softer now but no less firm. "How long have you been managing this branch?" Caught off guard by the sudden change in tone, Martin hesitated before answering. "Almost 3 years," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "And in those 3 years," Samantha continued, "have you ever encountered problems like this before? Or is today truly unique?" Martin hesitated again, weighing his options. He could lie and claim this was a rare occurrence, but something told him Samantha wouldn't believe it. She struck him as the kind of person who could see through deception with ease. Instead, he opted for partial honesty. "We've had our share of challenges," he admitted reluctantly, "but nothing quite like this." Samantha nodded slowly, as if she'd expected that answer. "Challenges are inevitable," she said. "No business runs perfectly all the time, but how you respond to those challenges matters more than anything else. Do you agree?" Martin nodded quickly, eager to show compliance. "Absolutely, Ms. Reed, I couldn't agree more." "Good." Samantha's gaze softened slightly, though her demeanor remained authoritative. "Because based on what I've seen today, your response leaves much to be desired. You haven't solved my problem, and you haven't offered a clear plan for preventing similar issues in the future. That's not leadership. It's negligence." The word hit Martin like a slap across the face. Negligence. It was harsh, unyielding, and undeniably accurate. He felt the heat rise in his cheeks, a mixture of shame and anger bubbling inside him. Anger, not at Samantha, but at himself. How had he let things spiral so far out of control? Why hadn't he anticipated the potential fallout of cutting corners and ignoring systemic problems? Before he could dwell on those questions further, Samantha spoke again. "I'm going to leave now," she announced, her voice steady and deliberate. "But rest assured this isn't over. My team will be reviewing the performance of this branch thoroughly. In the meantime, I suggest you take a long, hard look at how you're running things here, because if this is the standard you've set, then changes are going to be necessary, starting at the top." With that, she turned on her heel and walked toward the exit, leaving Martin rooted to the spot. The room remained eerily quiet as the glass doors swung shut behind her. For several seconds, no one moved or spoke. Then, almost simultaneously, the murmurs began. Employees exchanged nervous glances while customers resumed their conversations in hushed tones. Martin stood there, his heart pounding in his chest, replaying the encounter in his mind. He knew Samantha's visit would have consequences, serious ones, but the full extent of the fallout was still unclear. Would he lose his job? Would the entire branch be shut down? Or would this serve as a wake-up call, forcing him to confront the issues he'd ignored for too long? As he returned to his office, closing the door behind him, Martin sank into his chair and buried his face in his hands. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to fully acknowledge the truth. He had failed, not just as a manager, but as a leader. And now he would have to face the repercussions head-on. Little did he know, however, that Samantha's departure marked only the beginning of a chain reaction that would ripple through the company. Back at corporate headquarters, news of the incident spread quickly, sparking debates among executives and prompting calls for immediate action. Meanwhile, within the branch itself, employees began to reflect on their own roles in the dysfunction, wondering whether they, too, bore responsibility for what had happened. The moment Samantha Reed left the bank, a wave of whispers erupted among the employees and customers. Some were shocked by her sudden appearance. Others couldn't stop talking about how calmly, yet firmly, she had confronted Martin Cole. The branch manager, still reeling from the encounter, retreated to his office, closing the door behind him with a heavy sigh. But even inside the relative privacy of his workspace, he couldn't escape the weight of what had just happened. His hands trembled as he picked up the phone to call corporate headquarters, not because he thought it would help, but because he knew they'd find out sooner or later anyway. News traveled fast in the corporate world, especially when it involved someone as prominent as Samantha Reed. Within hours, the story reached the ears of senior executives, who convened an emergency meeting to discuss the fallout. Sitting around a polished conference table in a sleek high-rise office, the board members exchanged uneasy glances. Samantha herself was present, seated at the head of the table, her expression neutral, but commanding. She began by recounting the events of the day in detail, leaving no room for ambiguity. "This wasn't just a minor inconvenience," she said, her voice steady but laced with authority. "It was symptomatic of deeper issues within that branch and possibly others like it. When a customer walks into one of our banks, regardless of who they are, they deserve respect, professionalism, and competence. What I experienced today was the opposite of that." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. One executive cleared his throat nervously before speaking up. "Ms. Reed, we understand your concerns and clearly something went wrong. But do you think this warrants drastic action? After all, every branch has its challenges." Samantha cut him off with a sharp look. "Drastic action?" she echoed, raising an eyebrow. "This isn't about overreacting. It's about accountability. If we let incidents like this slide, it sends a message to everyone else that subpar performance is acceptable. And let me be clear, it's not. Not for our customers, not for our employees, and certainly not for the reputation of this company." The room fell silent again, the gravity of her statement sinking in. Another executive, a woman named Laura Chen, leaned forward, her tone cautious but supportive. "So, what do you propose we do next? Clearly, changes need to be made, but where do we start?" Samantha didn't hesitate. "First, we address the immediate issue. Martin Cole will be relieved of his duties effective immediately. He failed to uphold the standards expected of a branch manager, and his inability to resolve the situation reflects poorly on the entire organization." Gasps rippled through the room, though no one dared argue. They all knew Samantha wasn't one to back down once she'd made a decision. Besides, the evidence against Martin was undeniable. Still, some felt uneasy about firing him outright without giving him a chance to explain himself further. One executive ventured cautiously, "Do you think termination is the only option? Perhaps he could benefit from additional training or oversight instead." Samantha shook her head firmly. "Training and oversight are important, yes, but leadership starts with accountability. If Martin can't take responsibility for his actions, how can we trust him to lead a team? This isn't personal, it's business. We owe it to our customers and employees to set a higher standard." With that, the matter was settled. Martin's fate was sealed, though the news wouldn't reach him until later that evening. For now, the focus shifted to broader reforms across the company. Samantha outlined a multi-step plan aimed at addressing systemic inefficiencies, improving staff training, and implementing stricter quality control measures. Each proposal was met with nods of approval, though privately some wondered if such sweeping changes could truly succeed. Meanwhile, back at the branch, life continued, or rather, tried to. Employees buzzed with nervous energy, speculating about what would happen next. Would they lose their jobs too? Would the branch close entirely? No one had answers, which only added to the anxiety. Even the customers seemed unsettled, casting wary glances at the tellers and exchanging hushed theories about the mysterious CEO who had stormed in earlier. Martin, unaware of the official decision regarding his employment, spent the rest of the day trying to salvage whatever dignity he had left. He called meetings with his staff, urging them to stay focused despite the uncertainty. "We'll get through this," he assured them, though his voice lacked conviction. Deep down, he suspected his days as branch manager were numbered, but admitting it aloud felt like surrender. By late afternoon, 2 men in suits arrived at the branch. Their arrival sent another ripple of panic through the employees, who recognized them instantly as representatives from corporate. Without ceremony, they ushered Martin into a private room and delivered the news. His position had been terminated, effective immediately. They handed him a severance package along with instructions to vacate the premises by the end of the day. For Martin, the reality of losing his job hit hard. As he packed up his belongings, photos of his family, a few mementos from years past, he struggled to process everything that had transpired. How had it come to this? Just yesterday, he'd been an ordinary branch manager, juggling the usual stresses of the job. Today, he was unemployed, humiliated, and facing an uncertain future. But as painful as it was, Martin couldn't deny that part of him understood why it had happened. Over the years, he'd grown complacent, prioritizing short-term fixes over long-term solutions. He'd ignored warning signs, the aging technology, the dwindling morale among staff, because confronting them would have required effort and resources he didn't want to invest. Now, standing alone in his empty office, he realized the true cost of his negligence. Word of Martin's dismissal spread quickly, both within the branch and beyond. Employees reacted with a mix of relief and sympathy. While many agreed that his leadership had been lacking, they also recognized that he wasn't solely to blame for the branch's problems. Systemic failures ran deeper than any single individual, and addressing them would require collective effort. In the days that followed, corporate headquarters wasted no time rolling out its reform initiatives. A new manager, a seasoned professional named Rachel Nguyen, was appointed to oversee the branch. Her first order of business was to conduct a thorough audit of operations, identifying areas for improvement. She wasted no time engaging with employees, holding town hall meetings to listen to their concerns and ideas. Unlike Martin, Rachel emphasized transparency and collaboration, earning the trust of her team almost immediately. Under Rachel's leadership, the branch underwent significant changes. Outdated systems were replaced with modern technology, streamlining processes and reducing errors. Staff members received extensive training, not just in technical skills, but also in customer service and conflict resolution. Morale began to improve, as did productivity. Customers noticed the difference too, praising the branch for its renewed efficiency and friendliness. As for Martin, His journey was far from over. Losing his job forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about himself, not just as a manager, but as a person. At first, he wallowed in self-pity, blaming everyone except himself for his downfall. But gradually, he began to reflect more deeply. He enrolled in online courses to sharpen his skills and took on freelance consulting work to rebuild his confidence. Though the road ahead was daunting, he vowed to learn from his mistakes and emerge stronger. Back at corporate headquarters, Samantha watched these developments unfold with quiet satisfaction. Firing Martin hadn't been easy, but it was necessary, not just for the sake of the branch, but for the integrity of the entire organization. More importantly, the incident served as a catalyst for meaningful change, proving that even the most challenging situations could yield positive outcomes if handled correctly. And so, life moved forward, for the branch, for Martin, and for Samantha herself. What had started as a simple errand had transformed into a pivotal moment, reshaping lives and setting new standards for excellence. It was a reminder that leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about inspiring growth, fostering accountability, and striving for continuous improvement. The days following Martin Cole's dismissal were a whirlwind of activity at the branch. Rachel Nguyen, the newly appointed manager, wasted no time implementing her vision for change. From the moment she stepped through the doors, it was clear that she wasn't there to maintain the status quo. She was there to transform it. Her energy was infectious, her confidence unwavering, and her approach refreshingly hands-on. Employees who had grown accustomed to Martin's distant and often dismissive management style found themselves adjusting to someone who genuinely seemed to care about their well-being. Rachel's first priority was understanding the root causes of the branch's problems. She spent hours poring over reports, analyzing customer feedback, and observing daily operations. But more importantly, she listened to employees, to customers, and even to former staff members who had left under Martin's leadership. What she uncovered painted a picture of systemic neglect, outdated technology that constantly malfunctioned, inadequate training programs that left employees ill-prepared for complex tasks, and a culture of fear where mistakes were punished rather than seen as opportunities for growth. Armed with this knowledge, Rachel devised a comprehensive plan to overhaul every aspect of the branch's operations. First, she tackled the issue of technology. The aging computers and glitch-prone software that had frustrated both customers and employees were replaced with state-of-the-art systems designed to streamline transactions and reduce errors. Employees received thorough training on how to use the new equipment, ensuring a smooth transition. For many, it was the first time they felt truly supported in their roles. Next, Rachel turned her attention to staff morale. Under Martin's leadership, the workplace had become a place of tension and low spirits. Employees felt undervalued and overworked, leading to high turnover rates and poor performance. To combat this, Rachel introduced weekly team-building sessions, open forums for sharing ideas, and recognition programs to celebrate individual achievements. She also implemented flexible scheduling options to help employees balance their personal and professional lives. Slowly but surely, the atmosphere began to shift. Smiles returned to faces, conversations became less guarded, and collaboration replaced competition. Customers noticed the difference almost immediately. Gone were the long wait times and frustrating technical issues. In their place was a streamlined process that made banking feel effortless. Teller lines moved faster, inquiries were resolved promptly, and interactions with staff felt warmer and more personalized. Word spread quickly, and soon the branch saw an uptick in foot traffic, not just from existing customers, but from newcomers curious about the improvements. At corporate headquarters, Samantha Reed monitored these developments closely. While she hadn't personally overseen the day-to-day changes, she remained deeply invested in their success. Every report Rachel sent reaffirmed her belief that decisive action could lead to meaningful transformation. Still, Samantha knew better than to rest on her laurels. The incident at the branch had exposed vulnerabilities not only within that location, but potentially across the entire organization. If similar issues existed elsewhere, and she suspected they did, they needed to be addressed before they escalated into bigger problems. To that end, Samantha launched a company-wide initiative aimed at identifying and eliminating inefficiencies at all levels. She assembled a task force comprising senior executives, IT specialists, and frontline employees to conduct audits of branches nationwide. Their mission was simple, yet ambitious: ensure that every customer, regardless of which branch they visited, received the same level of service and professionalism. This included upgrading infrastructure, standardizing training protocols, and fostering a culture of accountability and transparency. The initiative sparked mixed reactions among employees. Throughout the organization, some welcomed the changes, seeing them as long overdue improvements. Others, however, resisted, fearing that increased scrutiny would lead to micromanagement or job losses. Samantha anticipated this pushback and addressed it head-on during a virtual town hall meeting broadcast to all employees. "I understand that change can be uncomfortable," she said, her tone calm but resolute. "But let me be clear. This isn't about punishing anyone or singling people out. It's about raising the bar for ourselves, for our customers, and for the future of this company. We owe it to everyone who trusts us with their finances to deliver excellence consistently." Her words resonated with many, though skepticism lingered in some corners. To bridge the gap, Samantha encouraged open communication, inviting employees to share their concerns and suggestions directly with her members of the task force. She also emphasized that the goal wasn't perfection, it was progress. Small, incremental changes could add up to something transformative if everyone worked together. Back at the branch, Rachel continued to lead by example. Her dedication inspired her team to embrace the reforms wholeheartedly. One employee, a young teller named Maria, stood out in particular. Before Rachel's arrival, Maria had considered quitting due to burnout and frustration. But under Rachel's mentorship, she rediscovered her passion for helping others and took on additional responsibilities, eventually earning a promotion to assistant manager. Stories like Maria's became common as the branch flourished under its new leadership. As weeks turned into months, the impact of the changes became undeniable. Customer satisfaction scores soared, operational costs decreased, and employee retention rates improved significantly. The branch went from being one of the lowest performing locations in the network to a model of efficiency and excellence. Corporate headquarters took note, using it as a blueprint for other branches undergoing similar transformations. For Samantha, the success of the initiative reinforced her belief in the power of accountability and adaptability. Firing Martin Cole had been a difficult decision, but it had paved the way for broader reforms that benefited not only the branch but the entire organization. More importantly, it reminded her of the importance of staying connected to the ground-level realities of her business. No matter how high you climbed in the corporate ladder, true leadership required humility, empathy, and a willingness to listen. Meanwhile, Martin Cole embarked on his own journey of reinvention. Losing his job had been devastating, but it forced him to confront truths he might otherwise have ignored. He realized that his downfall wasn't just about bad luck or external circumstances, it was about choices he'd made along the way. Choices to prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability, to avoid difficult conversations instead of addressing them head-on, and to focus on maintaining control rather than empowering those around him. Determined to turn things around, Martin enrolled in a leadership development program offered by a local university. The coursework challenged him to rethink everything he thought he knew about management, from conflict resolution to strategic planning. He also sought mentorship from seasoned professionals who shared insights into effective leadership practices. Though the process was humbling, it was also enlightening. For the first time in years, Martin felt hopeful about his future. By the end of the year, Martin had completed the program and secured a position as a consultant for small businesses struggling with organizational challenges. It wasn't the glamorous role he once held, but it gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. Helping others navigate obstacles reminded him of why he'd entered the field in the first place. To make a difference, however, small. Reflecting on his journey, Martin couldn't help but marvel at how much he'd grown. Losing his job had been painful, yes, but it had also been a blessing in disguise. It taught him resilience, humility, and the value of continuous learning, lessons he carried with him wherever he went. And so, life moved forward, for the branch, for Martin, and for Samantha. What had started as a single, seemingly isolated incident had rippled outward, touching countless lives and sparking positive change. It was a testament to the idea that even the most challenging situations could yield opportunities for growth, if approached with courage, determination, and an open mind. Months had passed since Samantha Reed's unexpected visit to the branch, and the transformation was nothing short of remarkable. The once dysfunctional location now buzzed with energy, its polished floors gleaming under bright lights and its employees moving with purpose. Customers filed in and out steadily, their faces reflecting satisfaction rather than frustration. The branch had become a shining example of what could happen when leadership, teamwork, and innovation came together seamlessly. Rachel Nguyen, the new manager, had proven herself not just as a capable leader, but as a visionary. Under her guidance, the branch wasn't just functioning, it was thriving. She introduced initiatives like Customer Appreciation Days, where small gifts or discounts were offered to loyal patrons, and community outreach programs that strengthened ties with local businesses and residents. These efforts weren't just about boosting revenue, they were about building relationships and fostering trust. For many customers, the branch no longer felt like a cold, impersonal institution. It felt like a partner in their financial journey. Employees, too, embraced this renewed sense of purpose. Maria, the young teller who had nearly quit before Rachel's arrival, continued to excel in her role as assistant manager. Her enthusiasm was contagious, inspiring her colleagues to take ownership of their responsibilities and strive for excellence. Even tasks that might have seemed mundane, like processing deposits or answering phone calls, were approached with care and professionalism. It was clear that Rachel's emphasis on empowerment and recognition had paid off. Employees no longer saw themselves as cogs in a machine. They saw themselves as vital contributors to something bigger. At corporate headquarters, Samantha Reed watched these developments with quiet pride. She hadn't expected the turnaround to happen so quickly, or so thoroughly, but she couldn't deny the results. Reports showed that the branch was exceeding performance targets, customer complaints had plummeted, and employee morale was at an all-time high. More importantly, the ripple effects of the changes were spreading. Other branches across the network began adopting similar strategies, eager to replicate the success they'd witnessed firsthand. Still, Samantha knew better than to declare victory prematurely. Success, she believed, wasn't a destination. It was a continuous process. To ensure lasting change, she implemented quarterly reviews for all branches, requiring managers to present detailed updates on their progress. These reviews weren't designed to punish underperformers but to identify areas for improvement and provide support where needed. Samantha also encouraged cross-branch collaboration, creating platforms for managers to share best practices and learn from one another. By fostering a culture of transparency and mutual accountability, she hoped to prevent future incidents like the one that had sparked this transformation. For Martin Cole, life had taken a surprising yet fulfilling turn. After completing his leadership development program, he threw himself into his work as a consultant with renewed vigor. At first, landing clients proved challenging. His reputation as a fired branch manager preceded him, raising doubts among potential employers. But Martin refused to let setbacks deter him. He poured his heart into every project, applying the lessons he'd learned during his training and drawing inspiration from the mentors who had guided him along the way. One of his earliest assignments involved working with a struggling family-owned bakery in a nearby town. The owners, overwhelmed by mounting debts and declining sales, had reached out to Martin in desperation. Though initially skeptical, they soon realized that his advice was practical and actionable. He helped them restructure their finances, negotiate better terms with suppliers, and launch targeted marketing campaigns to attract new customers. Within months, the bakery was back on solid footing, and the owners credited Martin with saving their business. Word of his success spread, leading to more opportunities. Before long, Martin found himself consulting for a variety of businesses, from retail shops to tech startups, all grappling with unique challenges. Each project taught him something new, reinforcing his belief in the importance of adaptability and perseverance. What surprised him most, however, was how much he enjoyed helping others succeed. There was a deep satisfaction in knowing that his expertise could make a tangible difference in people's lives. Despite his newfound career path, Martin occasionally reflected on his past mistakes. He still cringed when he thought about the day Samantha Reed walked into his branch, exposing flaws he'd ignored for far too long. Yet, rather than dwell on regret, he chose to see those experiences as stepping stones. They reminded him of the dangers of complacency and the value of humility, lessons he carried with him into every interaction. As the months turned into a year, the connections between the key players in this story began to weave together in unexpected ways. One crisp autumn morning, Samantha decided to revisit the branch that had started it all. This time, her visit wasn't prompted by a personal issue, but by curiosity. She wanted to see firsthand how the reforms had held up over time and whether the improvements were sustainable. When she arrived, she was greeted warmly by Rachel and several employees who recognized her immediately. The atmosphere was lively, with customers chatting amiably and staff members assisting them with smiles. Samantha spent the next hour touring the facility, observing operations, and speaking with both employees and patrons. Everyone she met praised Rachel's leadership and expressed gratitude for the positive changes that had transformed their experience. Toward the end of her visit, Samantha pulled Rachel aside for a private conversation. "You've done an incredible job here," she said sincerely. "This branch is proof that change is possible and that it starts with strong leadership." Rachel beamed, clearly touched by the compliment. "Thank you, Ms. Reed. I couldn't have done it without the support of my team. And honestly, your decision to step in when things were at their worst gave us the push we needed to do better." Samantha nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes tough decisions are necessary, not because they're easy, but because they create opportunities for growth. I'm proud of what you've accomplished." The two women parted ways after exchanging a few more words, but Samantha's mind lingered on the conversation as she drove away. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, the firing of Martin, the overhaul of the branch, and the broader reforms sweeping through the company, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Leading wasn't always about making popular choices. Sometimes it was about doing what was right, even when it hurt. Unbeknownst to Samantha, Martin's path would eventually intersect with hers once again. During one of his consulting projects, he crossed paths with an executive from corporate headquarters who recognized his name. Intrigued by his story, the executive invited him to give a presentation at an upcoming leadership conference hosted by the company. Initially hesitant, Martin agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to share his journey and perhaps inspire others facing similar struggles. Standing on stage, Martin recounted his rise and fall as a branch manager, his painful dismissal, and his subsequent reinvention. His voice trembled slightly as he admitted his failures, but it grew stronger as he described the lessons he'd learned and the impact he'd made in his new role. When he finished speaking, the audience erupted into applause, moved by his honesty and resilience. Among the attendees was Samantha herself. As she listened to Martin's speech, she felt a mix of admiration and relief. Watching him transform from someone whose actions had jeopardized the company's reputation to someone actively contributing to its success filled her with hope. It reinforced her belief that everyone deserved a second chance, if they were willing to work for it. After the conference, Samantha approached Martin with a warm smile. "Your story is inspiring," she said simply. "I'm glad to see how far you've come." Martin hesitated for a moment, then extended his hand. "Thank you, Ms. Reed, for everything, including holding me accountable when I needed it most." Their handshake marked the closing of a chapter that had begun with tension and uncertainty, but ended with redemption and mutual respect. It was a reminder that even the most difficult moments could lead to growth, if approached with courage and determination. And so life continued, for the branch, for Martin, and for Samantha. Each had been shaped by the events of the past year, emerging stronger and wiser than before. Together, their stories served as a testament to the power of accountability, resilience, and the enduring belief that change, though challenging, was always possible. The transformation of the branch and the ripple effects it created throughout the organization wasn't just a story about one location or one person. It was a testament to how interconnected every part of a system truly is, and how even the smallest actions can spark monumental change. As time passed, Samantha Reed found herself reflecting on this truth more often than she expected. The incident that had started with her casual visit to a struggling branch had evolved into something far greater than she could have anticipated, a catalyst for growth, accountability, and renewed purpose. By the end of the second year, the branch, under Rachel Nguyen's leadership, had become a flagship location for the company. Its success wasn't measured solely in numbers, though those were impressive, but in the way it embodied the values Samantha had always strived to instill in her organization: respect, integrity, and excellence. What made it particularly remarkable was the fact that these principles weren't imposed from above. They were embraced by everyone involved, from the newest teller to the most seasoned manager. This organic adoption of core values spoke volumes about Rachel's ability to inspire others and create an environment where people felt valued and empowered. Samantha visited the branch periodically, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely enjoyed seeing what it had become. Each trip reminded her of why she had chosen this career path in the first place, not for power or prestige, but to make a difference in people's lives. During one such visit, she noticed a plaque mounted on the wall near the entrance. It read, "Success isn't defined by what we achieve alone, but by the positive impact we leave behind." Samantha smiled as she realized Rachel must have commissioned it, a subtle nod to the journey they'd all been through together. Employees who had once dreaded coming to work now thrived in their roles. Maria, the former teller turned assistant manager, had taken her newfound confidence and applied it beyond the confines of the branch. She began mentoring younger employees, sharing tips on everything from customer service to managing stress. Her influence extended far beyond the walls of the building, creating a ripple effect that strengthened the entire team. Other branches within the network started inviting Maria to lead workshops, eager to learn from her experiences and replicate her approach. Even customers noticed the shift. One elderly woman, a longtime patron named Mrs. Thompson, approached Samantha during one of her visits. "I've been banking here for over 20 years, she said, her voice warm with admiration. "But I've never seen this place so alive. Everyone seems happy to be here, and it makes me happy to come back." Samantha thanked her, touched by the sentiment. Moments like these reaffirmed her belief that businesses weren't just about transactions. They were about relationships, and when those relationships were nurtured with care and authenticity, they could transform not only individual lives, but entire communities. For Martin Cole, life had taken a direction he never could have predicted. His work as a consultant had grown steadily, earning him recognition not just within his immediate circle but across industries. He specialized in helping small businesses navigate financial challenges, leveraging both his past mistakes and his hard-earned knowledge to guide them towards sustainable solutions. His clients often praised him not just for his expertise but for his humility and willingness to listen, a stark contrast to the distant and defensive manager he used to be. One day, while working with a local bookstore owner facing mounting debts, Martin found himself drawing parallels between the shopkeeper's struggles and his own. The owner had let minor issues pile up until they became overwhelming, much like Martin had done at the branch. Rather than judge, Martin shared his own story openly, emphasizing the importance of addressing problems early and seeking help when needed. By the end of their session, the owner left feeling hopeful, not just about his business but about his ability to overcome adversity. Martin's redemption arc reached its peak when he published a book titled Second Chances: Lessons Learned the Hard Way. In it, he chronicled his fall from grace, his journey of self-reflection, and the strategies he developed to rebuild his career. The book resonated deeply with readers, many of whom saw themselves in Martin's story. Critics praised it for its honesty and practical advice, and before long, it became a bestseller. Requests for speaking engagements poured in, giving Martin a platform to share his insights with audiences worldwide. Despite his growing fame, Martin remained grounded. He credited his success not to luck, but to perseverance and the support of those who had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. When asked during interviews about the turning point in his life, he always mentioned Samantha Reed, not as someone who had wronged him, but as someone who had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths. "She gave me the gift of accountability," he would say, "and though it hurt at the time, it ultimately saved me." As the years went by, Samantha continued to lead her company with the same passion and dedication that had driven her from the beginning. But she also allowed herself moments of reflection, recognizing that leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about learning and growing alongside those you served. The incident at the branch had taught her valuable lessons about staying connected to the ground-level realities of her business. It reminded her that no matter how high you climbed, true leadership required empathy, humility, and a commitment to continuous improvement. In a twist of fate, Samantha invited Martin to join her company again, not as a branch manager but as a senior advisor tasked with overseeing training programs for new managers. At first, Martin hesitated, unsure if he was ready to step back into the corporate world. But after some thought, he accepted, viewing it as an opportunity to give back and ensure that others wouldn't repeat the same mistakes he had made. Their collaboration proved fruitful. Together, they designed workshops focused on effective communication, conflict resolution, and fostering a culture of accountability. These programs were rolled out across the organization, further solidifying the changes Samantha had initiated years earlier. Employees responded positively, appreciating the emphasis on personal development and teamwork. Looking back on everything that had transpired, Samantha couldn't help but marvel at how interconnected their journeys had been. What had started as a single moment of confrontation had blossomed into a web of transformation, touching countless lives along the way. For her, it was proof that challenges, no matter how daunting, could lead to meaningful growth, if approached with courage and a willingness to learn. Martin, too, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Though his road to redemption had been long and difficult, he emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. He often thought about the plaque at the branch and how its message mirrored his own philosophy. Success wasn't about perfection. It was about leaving the world better than you found it. As the sun set on another day, Samantha stood outside the branch, watching as employees locked up for the evening. Cars drove by, headlights casting soft glows on the pavement. She took a deep breath, savoring the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her efforts, and those of so many others, had made a lasting impact. This story wasn't just hers, nor was it Martin's or Rachel's alone. It belonged to everyone who had played a role in shaping it, proving that even the most challenging moments could yield beauty and purpose. And as she walked away, she carried with her the hope that their collective journey would continue to inspire others to strive for excellence, embrace accountability, and believe in the power of second chances.